I'd like to call to order this Planning and Development Committee for Thursday, December the 21st. And our first order of business is declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind you again of your responsibility. We have none. The one delegation we had has been canceled for today, so we'll move into action items. So our first action item is the Aaron Elderslie Official Plan Amendment number 11, and I believe Jack is going to make the presentation.
Good morning, members of the committee. The application here we have before you today is for the approval of a local official plan amendment. The purpose of the official plan amendment is to identify and to add some official plan policies to protect source water protection features. We wrote this report for you in anticipation that the municipality would adopt the amendment on December the 11th, which they did do. And so the amendment is fairly short, but it as you say, it does outline, identify the areas that require some additional consideration to protect the source water, drinking water sources in the municipality, and getting this done will allow the municipality to check the box on conformity with the Clean Water Act, which we noted in the report for you. And that's pretty much.
Sorry, I cut you off there, Jack. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's pretty much all I need to say. So the recommendation is that we have the amendment approved and that Bruce be authorized to sign the decision sheet.
Thank you. Then there's a recommendation. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by David, seconded by Robert. The recommendation is that the Aaron Elderslie Official Plan Amendment 11-1749 report be approved. Is there any discussion or questions? Paul? No, I was not. Okay. All in favor then? Well, that's carried. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is it's an RFP for data collection and analysis, and I believe Kara is going to make the presentation.
Good morning. This report outlines the outcomes of an RFP that was recently closed here at the county. This is for the project that we've called the Economic Impact of Tourism for Bruce County. So if you'll remember, this is looking at how do we create a methodology to collect information from all of our partners and be able to understand the tourism industry and the impacts that it's having on our economy year over year. So the outcome of this project will be that model that'll allow us to do annual reporting with the intent of helping business make more informed decisions and ourselves understand what it's doing in our economy. We issued an RFP for the work, and those RFPs were evaluated under review criteria. It outlines for the committee the criteria that were used to evaluate the applicants. This is a partnership that we have with the province of Ontario. There is $80,000 that's been set aside for this project, 40 from the county of Bruce and 40 from the province of Ontario. We had two submissions, one from Ipsos, which was at $75,000, and one from RK House and Associates, which was at $60,000. Using the evaluation criteria, Ipsos was the preferred option with a score of 86.25%. And according to the purchasing procedures, if the lowest quote is not the recommended RFP, a report shall come forward to committee for consideration and approval. So this report outlines those details and is looking for committee's endorsement to enter into contract with Ipsos to undertake the project.
Thank you, Kara. So there's a recommendation that we enter into a contract with Ipsos. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Ann, seconded by Mitch. Is there any discussion or questions on this? If not, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So our next item then is Bruce County Rail Trail Trestle Bridge improvements, and I believe Chris is going to make the presentation.
As the committee is aware, a number of years ago, the two rail trestle bridges located in Paisley were upgraded and repaired in terms of the superstructure. And there was some money that came to the county through, I think in my recollection, it was Hydro One Networks, who made a contribution towards the rail trail in recognition of them installing fiber cable along the rail trail. So that money capital was taken in to fix those rail trestles and also put decking and railing on the rail trestles. And it's there. If you haven't been there, you really have to go. Very beautiful and spectacular. They go over, of course, Mill Creek and the other major creek that runs through Paisley, the Teeswater River. And so it's quite an attraction for the locals, a great place to go to walk your dog and so on, and additionally a bit of a tourist draw in terms of hikers and cyclists and bird watchers coming from other jurisdictions. So it's been good from that perspective. At the time when we revamped the bridges, we put out an expression to Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs as whether they were interested, because it would involve a slightly different design for them to access the trails, the trestles. And at the time they said no, they would take a pass. And what's happened since that time, since the introduction, blame partly misconception about Bill 100. And Bill 100 was supposed to make it easier for trail groups to get access, and one of the impacts of that has been a number of private landowners are suspicious of the bill. And so throughout Bruce County, as well as the province, there's been a loss of private lands for OFSC, which they rely upon. So in this case, what they're looking at then is a way to complete their trail network in the Paisley area by resurfacing the bridges to allow snowmobile traffic on the bridges. This will provide an economic benefit, I think, to Paisley to really have a direct link into the downtown, which is not currently available. And additionally, provide yet one more user group who's willing to put in capital as part of the partnership towards the bridges. We've had preliminary discussions with District 9 and OFSC. They've provided some preliminary design drawings in terms of how those bridges could be retrofitted. Involves the use of precast concrete pads that are dropped on top of the trestle and widening of the railings. So OFSC, they do have funding through the province and the feds towards trails. So there's money there that they can access. We've indicated to them this time from a staff perspective, we think it would be great to have another user group sharing those bridges. Much of the rail trail is already being used by OFSC and the ATV clubs as well, so the existing context is motorized. So the discussions were then we should probably be moving ahead with this, but the issue is that it's a major capital investment. Normally I just sign trail user agreements for OFSC. We have a number of properties that they go over and we have a 5-year agreement, but in this case I thought it would be best to provide some exposure for the proposal and just to let the Snowmobile Club know if in fact it's the case that there's council support for this, and then they can put this resolution in their back pocket to pursue funding and know that they don't require further council resolutions to go ahead and start dealing with the bridges. I will say we do have our own existing contract with a private engineering firm who provides the maintenance reports back on the bridges, and so we have a good idea in terms of what we need to do to capitalize and maintain those bridges. And then secondly, all the drawings and so on will be reviewed by the engineer to ensure that it's safe before it's installed and will suit the purpose as intended. So the recommendation for council for consideration is that the proposed OFSC Snowmobile Club Rail Trail Bridge improvements for accessibility be approved.
So we've heard the recommendation in the report. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Milt, seconded by Ann. Any discussion on this?
So they're not looking for any county dollars at this point?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Paul?
It'll be up to the county, or whether we do it in-house or farm the engineering out. We want to make sure that the trestles are strong enough for this extra weight that they're proposing. I'm having difficult trying to picture these concrete slabs and what does that do for the foot traffic that's already there. Like, it still has to be a multi-user friendly bridge.
Yeah, and the trick will be then to design it's not only the concrete slab but also the railings in such a way that the snow either blows off, the snow can't get too high on top of the bridges, so some mechanism for the snow to come off it. So it involves details with the actual railing design. In terms of the trestles themselves, yeah, I mean, definitely our consulting engineer needs to sign off saying, given the weight of the snowmobiles and so on, that this is going to be, the trestle is structurally sound. So we do have reports every 2 years. No issues with the structure. being identified, other than the fact it requires maintenance. There's some areas where trees are popping up around the footings. There's a couple of stringers that need to be repaired on the actual deck part. And so this has already been categorized by our own engineer that work needs to be done. And then so the Snowmobile Club can also help participate in funding those improvements as well as part of the overall redo of the bridges. So yeah, the criteria has to be that it's suitable for other trail users, walkers, hikers, and so on, and deal with the issue of snow buildup and weight in the wintertime. So they'll use their own consulting engineer to make the proposal, and then the county will use our engineer to review the proposal and provide a stamp of approval before they go ahead with the capital works.
David?
Has the winter groomer been going over the bridge in the past, and if the Snowmobile Club has access, will it be going over?
No, when the original railings were built, they weren't designed for to withstand any kind of shear from a motorized vehicle. So a snowmobile could be approaching a bridge, and then there's the railings and so on. There has to be a certain shear strength. So they were never evaluated for shear. It was just a hiking bridge. So that needs to be reevaluated in terms of what it's going to take for that. So all those engineering decisions would come back.
No further comments then? All in favor of the recommendation? That's carried. So our next item on the agenda then is the proposed amendments to the AuSable Bayfield Maitland Valley Source Protection Plan. And I believe Bruce is going to make the presentation.
Thanks. The proposed amendment actually is in the information items as well, if you're looking for details on that. I'd like to just briefly go over the three significant changes that affect Bruce County. One is the addition of the Ripley wellhead protection area that now extends into the Maitland Valley source water protection area. So this is essentially an amendment to the mapping and so on that is associated with the source water plan. And it affects Ripley. All the other municipalities are unaffected. In addition, the amendment that's proposed is wanting to change policy 12.1, which would allow risk management officials to provide written direction to municipal staff about the types of applications that could be excluded. And this would be helpful in removing some of the red tape and extra workload that the risk management officials are seeing as a result of planning applications. Finally, 12.2 would be changed to provide for 5 years for risk management plan completion, extending it by 2 years from the current 3-year time limit. Those essentially are the changes that have been proposed. Source Water Protection is looking for an endorsement or support from County Council for those changes, and I suggest that we provide that to them.
Thank you, Bruce. And then the recommendation is that the proposed amendments be up to the plan be approved. I need a mover. Moved by Mitch, seconded by Bob. Any discussion on this? All in favor then? That's carried. So the next items are information item, and the first one is a notice of proposed amendments to the source protection plans for Chris. Sorry, then the next item is the FSC Eastern Ontario Model Forest and Blue Source. And again, this is Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 years ago in our business plan, we talked about this idea of pursuing certification for our forests, and it's part of a consumer movement. And if you go to Home Depot or Home Hardware Lumberyard, it seems everything is certified now, and there's an international demand to know where things come from, and people are searching goods that are authentic. They like to name the place, they like to know the source, and they also like to know that it was done sustainability from a sustainable perspective. And so, for example, with regard to commercial timber harvesting, there's always been concerns with harvesting and the impacts it has on the natural environment. impacts it has on forest fires, forest fire management, and so on. Certainly in the developing world, also issues regarding labor and safety in terms of, particularly in mining and forestry industries, unsafe work practices and people not being paid. And additionally, in some jurisdictions, outright trampling on Aboriginal First Nations rights and claims, and so on. So basically, forestry certification is a way to provide international exposure along this concept of consumer, a chain of control, chain of command. They know where it's come from, they know it's been ethically produced. So over the past 12 months, Kevin Predden, our key forestry person, has been working with another company called Eastern Ontario Forest Alliance. And Eastern Ontario Forest Alliance is a consortium that started up of mostly county forest landowners and has since extended into large landholders who have private lands within their inventory, and they act as an agency to provide federal forestry certification. So over the past 12 months, it's been about producing records, about providing evidence of our management practices over the last 10 years or so, and then also an audit of our records and the actual silviculture prescriptions which are included within the management plan. So that's been pretty good. It was a full audit, and actually our delegation this morning, who was Jim Hendry, was going to come out and give a bit of an update. Unfortunately, he's off for medical reasons, and hopefully we'll get him out in January. So just to note that we have received that certification, and perhaps we can ask Jim out again for the January meeting. This report takes a little bit of a different tact, and as part of this, it seems the Forestry Alliance is always trying to push things to the next level. And there was an announcement that the province of Ontario would be participating with Quebec and the state of California around this idea of carbon trading. And if you read the materials anywhere in the newspaper or some of the articles, it seems to me quite complex. I still don't quite fully understand it. Although that if you are a producer of carbon and emit things into the air, you can buy credits from somebody else who's doing the opposite. And part of doing the opposite in carbon trading is maintaining sustainable forestry management practices. Number two, encouraging growth in the forest, just in terms of tree size, diversity of species within it, and then thirdly, planting new trees in areas that are formerly didn't have trees, and seeing new growth in terms of plantations. So there's a number of options under that. So we began some discussions with the Alliance at this point, looking at what that could possibly mean, and the report just sort of outlines some of the potential around it. And again, without being an expert on this, this could be like really big, to steal a quote from Donald Trump. It is a situation whereby the impacts of carbon trading, if it works on the 13,000 acres, could be something we really should pursue. It may not go anywhere. Governments come and go, governments change. Carbon trading is a bit of a political hot potato, but it seems in some form, certainly internationally, it's here. Federally, it's hard to see how that's going to come together, but there's a commitment at the provincial level to participate with California and Quebec. So a report just to say we're jumping on the bandwagon just at a staff level to figure out what it means, and to work with this Eastern Ontario Forest Alliance, who seems to be potentially evaluating what we have to trade within those international markets in terms of potential offsets, so for information purposes.
Any questions on the report? Anne?
I was just curious. So Blue Source, maybe I missed it when I read it. Blue Source refers to what exactly? Just the name of a company that does what?
It seems like there's going to be, in carbon trading, manufacturers, industries, states and governments can't approach every little landowner. So that company is going to be trying to get the trading units and group them and conglomerate them, and saying, on the market, I have this. So it's not enough to have your farm. and Joe Blow's farm. And so they would start at this level in terms of looking at these large blocks of public land that are held within that large blocks of private landowners, and try to group those and agglomerate them so that they have a decent sized trading block. Maybe it's like a playing card. You can't walk into the game with the card torn in half. You have to have at least minimum size trading blocks. So they're trying to coordinate that, put together, put a name on it, and be able to potentially put it into the market.
So they'll get the money and then divide it up and take a cut?
Maybe something like that would be, there has to be something in it for them, maybe on a percentage basis or whatever the case might be, but yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions on this? It is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
But it is complicated. And
it won't be as simple as I said.
never will be. Never will be, no. Well, thanks very much, Chris. So the next item is, there are no further questions on this. The next item is the Ontario Municipal Board Appeals update, and I think Bruce is going to speak to us about this.
Okay, this isn't much of a report except to sort of bring you up to date on things that have been happening over the last few months. So there have been at least 7 appeals in 2017, and basically I've listed them there in the report. A number of them have been resolved or withdrawn, so that there are really only 2 that remain open, and those 2 are Bruce County OPA 217 appeal by Municipal Affairs, Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and Questa Planning is representing Mr. O'Driscoll or the O'Driscolls on that application. There has been a request for mediation on that one, but I don't have any other news at this point in time as to whether or not that's intended to begin. All that I know is that the province has asked for more information before they agree to mediation, so that's sort of an ongoing one. The other is Bruce County OPA 220, which was Ken Grube, I believe, and that was appealed by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing as well. And as of the last time that I checked, which was about a week ago, no hearing date has been set for that hearing. So those remain open and unresolved at this point in time. And I'd be willing to take questions or try to clarify any of those issues if you'd like.
Councillor Eadie, go ahead, Ann.
So the one in our municipality was withdrawn?
Are you referring to Tom Kerr?
No.
No.
I was referring to Mr. Hopper's.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, yes. That was withdrawn. Mr. Hopper withdrew his application, and the board released the file because there was no dispute anymore.
Okay. So the new rules for the OMB are coming in, and so the question I had was, so can somebody withdraw and then appeal under the new rules, or it's just totally done for now?
You know, if they've withdrawn their application, then the application is gone, essentially. They'd have to reapply if they wanted to restart that process.
Okay, so they'd have to come through our process again?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Further comments? Thanks for putting this on the agenda, but the 2 that are still outstanding, and I think if you recall, these were ones that we approved and have since been appealed, and I think that we need to take a position on how we're going to deal with 2 things going forward. I don't think sitting back and just doing nothing is probably the right thing. But I think a couple of, and this is one of the things that I've questioned a lot how we got to this point where municipal affairs, how they make this decision, and then why do they make the decision based on that. That's one thing. But I'd suggest that I think if there's going to be in number 4, if there's going to be mediation, if it does get to mediation, I would suggest that the county should be represented there. because we've got an interest in this, we approved it. And I would suggest that we, honestly, from my perspective, I'd suggest that we, if it goes to a board hearing, that we defend our position in both of those. The difficulty we're going to have is we've got a difference with the recommendation from our planning department, so I think we're going to need to go somewhere else to get someone to represent us. So I would make the hope that we could say that we'll defend 4 and 5 at the board. I don't know, do we need a motion or?
I agree, and I would make a motion if that's what is required to do that.
I'd look to the CAO for some direction. Now you want to proceed with this, but Milt, go ahead.
Just a comment, and I think I agree with you. I think we, as a council, decided to approve these, so I think we need to be represented as well. And even though it's contrary to our planning department's report, I think that we, in our wisdom, decided it was in the best interest of the application. So I think we should be represented as well. Just another question, if I could. With regards to these applications, I'm wondering if there's any benefit to meeting with the ministry, our warden and our planning chair, and some representation, our CAO, of course. And I'm just wondering if there's any merit in something like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would offer that there is merit to have that occur. We were delaying to do the outreach until January, and we will still proceed down with the regional office.
Ann, go ahead.
Well, the same with Mr. Hopper's case in our municipality. To me, that's another issue that we need to talk to them about, because for a rural area and for a property of, I think it was 150 acres, and the 50 was always separate and not that farmable. There has to be more common sense into some of these things, I feel. And I don't know whether council's interested in including something like that in it, or is that, because we did approve it as well.
Absolutely, but I think that the little twist, the difference with this one is the applicant's withdrawn his application. So I mean, but I think it's a good, I think it's a really valid question if we get this consultation with municipal affairs about. Yeah. Here's that whole issue and that question of why do you give us the approval authority and then second guess us when we use it in our best interest, in my mind.
When you have land that isn't farmable, but it's considered in an ag area because it's surrounded by some farmable land. Yeah. There has to be some more leeway, I think. I think
there's, and I don't want to get this discussion off it, but I think there's a bigger question about our own planning documents and what they say and how we get to this point. And I think we need to deal with those. I think we are moving to that, but anyways, I think Chris would like to speak to some of these questions.
Yeah, I think I'll just make comments in terms of process. So we're about to begin a discussion of general strategy, and this is related to a legal issue. And what I would suggest is two things. First of all, a resolution that we set up the meeting, or three things, that we set up the meeting with MMAH and staff. Secondly, in relation to OPA 217, so that if the province the province is the appellant, so the resolution is that if MMAH agrees to the mediation, council will participate at the mediation, and then details to be discussed in camera in January. And secondly, regarding OPA number 220, the council indicate to staff that they wish to participate, and then we need to provide you with options and strategy in camera in January in terms of what, because those are matters that should not be discussed in public in relation to how we would put together either a legal team that should be subject to a closed session in my mind. So at this point, staff direction that we're going down this road, further details provided a staff report with some options in terms of how you would do that.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said, for sure. I think we were just, the discussion here was about the path forward, and I absolutely agree with you. The one other thing I would say is, whatever this meeting with MMA, I think it should not be just staff and MMA. I think it should be some members of the committee, perhaps the warden and another couple of members of the committee, because...
through you, Mr. Chair, in November, committee had made the request for the meeting to occur, so... We will act on it, but it was to be in January, so we'll start that process in January.
Okay. So I think we've got a path forward then. Is everybody, any other questions or comments to it? So do we need a motion for that then? I guess we should generally, I think we've got a path forward without a motion. Is everybody happy with that? Or do you want a motion? Would you prefer a motion, Madam CAO?
I don't think so, Mr. Chair, that as staff direction, that staff will return with a closed session item. We'll look at the timelines and whether it needs to be in the first committee meeting in January or the second regularly scheduled committee time.
Yes, I know there is, well, Bruce alluded to it, I know there is discussions on the number 4 item 217 occurring now with the applicant, so thank you very much. So that, sure, absolutely.
Just with regards to the direction, so will the minutes include some of the conversation, or what record do we have of that, Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the November meeting or for future?
No, this direction.
Yeah, so this direction is just staff direction. We won't have a formal public written record of it. Of course, the live streaming we can always refer back to. But if you would feel more comfortable having a formal resolution, that we can certainly take that as well. So it's your wishes.
Personally, I think it's a good idea to have that record, please.
Okay, then I guess the motion is that we take steps to, maybe you better frame it.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that committee direct staff to return with a report for closed session to address the open OMB appeals, including number 217.
Okay, if moved by David, seconded by Mitch, is there any further discussion on this item? All in favor? Oh, that's carried. So that's the end of our agenda. So the next meeting will be next scheduled meeting is January 18th, 2018 in the new year. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Robert, seconded by Ann. All in favor, we're adjourned.